So in this video, I wanted to cover how I use 3 specific modules to make my life and my players' lives much easier when we're running 4th edition D&D in Foundry. Just to make a note, I'm running Foundry version 10. Not all of these modules are made to operate perfectly with 4th edition. I have managed to get them to work. I have heard some other people might have issues in that department. But for me, running Foundry version 10 and the latest version of the D&D4e beta system, I have had very little issue running these 3 modules. I will also note that this video is just going to be sort of stream of consciousness. I'm going to try to do this in one take. And so I apologize in advance if there's a lot of stammering on my part or a couple of asides here and there. I have no intention of editing this video or any video. But just to get into it, the 3 modules that I'm going to be discussing are active auras, which is going to allow us to have auras that place effects onto neighboring tokens or tokens within some range. Combat tracker effect tooltips, which are going to allow temporary effects to appear on creatures or tokens in the actual combat tracker that everybody, including players, has access to see, as well as D&D's effects panel, which is going to display in the right-hand corner of the screen a list of temporary effects on a selected token. In a player's case, this will typically be the character token that they are currently utilizing. And so I'm going to show off, first off, these 3 modules to show you what it is that they actually do. And I can start off by selecting Norbin here, who is a rune priest. And we can see that Norbin in the top right corner has this power called ROP, Rune of Protection, resist 2 to all damage. This is the D&D's effects panel module in action. And what this does is it allows a player to very easily see what effects are currently on their character. You could, of course, go into your character sheet and then go to the effects tab, but this is a little tedious and not easy to navigate. It also requires players to move away from their powers tab. This presents data to them very quickly and easily. More importantly, the way I have utilized how effects work by giving the effect label or the name that is displaying in this top right-hand corner is another way to make information more available for your players instantly. And so let me describe exactly what it is that I mean. If I go into the effects here and I can click edit, we can see that the effect label has a name or has a value associated with it. And the value here for me is ROP, resist 2 to all damage. And this is something that I do with all of my various effects. I try to give as much information as possible so that my players, when they scroll over the icons that appear in D&D's effects panel, they can see right away what the effect is doing to them. If it just says Rune of Protection, it's going to be much harder for them to understand what that actually does, especially if it's an effect that another class is granting to them. So having as much visual information readily available is really, really just a great thing. It allows players to quickly and easily assess what effects do, such as stunned or grants combat advantage or whatever, instead of having to go and flip through to the conditions page in the rulebook or Google it quickly, which doesn't take too much time. But in a game like 4th edition where pacing is, or in all role-playing games where pacing is very important, having as little distraction from what's actually going on in the game is critical. And I find this to be an excellent way of doing it. Of course, it's not perfect. I would much prefer to have like an effect description or something that appears underneath the name. That would be ideal. But for now, this works fine. The only issue I've seen is that on some small screens, the large named effects can cause this effects tab to take over the vast majority of the character sheet. And it doesn't hurt the character in any way. It just kind of pushes all the information to the side, and you have to either expand the screen or expand the character sheet to make it more usable. But otherwise, on sufficiently large screens, in my case, like if I'm on my MacBook monitor, that works fine. I'm currently on, I think, a 23-inch computer monitor right now, and I have no issues. My players haven't reported any issues to me, and some of them play on laptops and other small screen devices. So this here is an excellent way of instantly displaying all this information to your players. And the next module, Combat Tracker Effects Tooltips, is going to allow them to view effects that are on enemies and other tokens involved in the same combat, as well as themselves. Because as we can see, Defreds only gives you what your currently selected token, or only shows you effects that are currently on your selected token. But because players can't select enemy tokens or other tokens, they can't see what's currently affecting them. And so with Combat Tracker Effects Tooltip, we can easily remedy this problem. So I'm going to add these characters to a combat. And then we're going to roll some initiative and just get right into it. And so you'll see my combat tracker here, but you'll also see I have these little icons that are appearing next to the characters themselves. Now these icons are the exact same effects that we're seeing appear, and you can also see that as we hover over them, their name is appearing. So if we look at this hyena from Nightshade's perspective, we can see that the hyena has the Harrier effect currently active on it. Any enemy in the aura grants combat advantage. We can see Norbin's ability, ROP, resist 2 to all damage. We could see Rick, and we could see my character's effect as well. And this is excellent because now the players can coordinate. They can see what effects are currently on the field, who has what ongoing damage, who is currently silenced, who's prone, etc. Just at a glance. All of this information is readily available to them. And again, more information for your players at a glance is an incredible asset for you in any combat situation. And I urge you, if you're using this system, to try to train your players to utilize this as much as possible. If they have a question, give them the answer, but then also remind them that they can always look at the combat tracker to see all this information on their own without disrupting the flow of the game. So these two modules are very simple modules that instantly give us a lot of visual information. And the next module that we're going to go into is the actual aura itself. And so I already mentioned that Norbin is a rune priest. And so rune priests have this sort of complicated mechanic where they can swap between these two auras, a protection aura and a destruction aura, every time they use one of their powers. Now, when some of these auras are going to affect enemies, and some of these auras are going to affect allies, and so we have to differentiate those. They also give numerical bonuses to the people who are in the aura itself. So how do we make sure that this is properly being kept track of? Well, when I initially started running 4th edition, we had a very hard time with my player who was running the Rune Priest, as well as all the other players in the group who had to constantly keep track of not only this aura that was pretty ever present, but was also constantly shifting and would gain additional benefits based off of what power the player had just used. I don't know if you know about Rune Priests, but not only can they swap between powers, every time they use a specific power, it might have a rider attached to it that says like, oh, if you're using Rune of Destruction, it also does this. Or if you're using Rune of Protection, it also does this, right? And I devised a chart that players could look at, like a flow chart, but that just went over the players. Like it was not a great idea. No one wants to stop and look at a flow chart every single time their party member uses some special ability. That's no one's going to do it. And we would spend minutes, depending on the length of the combat, maybe 5, 10, even 20 minutes just talking about different effects and trying to make sure that effects are being properly tracked and whose aura is affecting who and what does it do, etc. But with the active auras module, it has become much easier for all of these effects, even numerical effects, to properly land on the targets that they are supposed to be on, and also deliver their actual effect. And so we can see Norbin is the one who generates this aura. If Norbin steps away from his allies, you'll notice I'm no longer within 1 square of them, and that aura is not affecting them anymore. If I step within range, the aura is now affecting them, and it affects them instantly. This is all due to the active auras module. You'll also see that when I use a destruction power, it not only removes my aura of protection, but it also gives me this new aura, a rune of destruction. And so if Norbin now goes to an enemy, the enemies get his aura. Not only that, but he gets their aura. And so you can see this is a very nifty effect where we're instantly keeping track of this aura that can affect multiple targets. And it's switching the actual aura automatically based off of which powers he's using. Now, I don't know if people are going to be using Rune Priests in their particular games, but what I decided to do is give him a different power, a different version of each power based off of destruction or protection. And I put a macro in each one that basically will check if he already has that particular aura in place already. And if he does, it doesn't do anything. If he doesn't, then it will activate the aura he's trying to activate. So in this case, let's say he uses Word of Diminishment Destruction. It'll check, do you already have Rune of Destruction on? If you do, then don't do anything. But if you don't, then we have to activate Rune of Destruction, right? That makes sense. If you don't have Rune of Destruction and you're trying to use Rune of Destruction, activate Rune of Destruction. So then what does activate Rune of Destruction do? Well, Rune of Destruction is a separate power in the others section. And as a brief aside, I highly recommend adding many more powers to your actual player characters and put it in the other section. You could even give them level names like Z, for example, just for when you're sorting things alphabetically or by level, in order to push them further down so that they're out of your player's way. So all of these generic powers, for example, have Z next to them, just so that the more utilized powers and abilities that my players are going to be using are pushed higher to the top of the list. But I digress. Activate Rune of Destruction is going to perform a macro, right? It executes a macro called Activate Rune of Destruction. Activate Rune of Destruction is going to, where is it? Activate Rune of Destruction is pretty long, but it's not too complicated. It's basically checking if he already has Rune of Protection. And if he does, we need to remove it. And then that's it. That's all it does. All it does is check if you already have the opposite rune, remove it. And then the effect in this actual power, this Activate Rune of Destruction, is to give this character Rune of Destruction, and that's it. And everything is done using the name of the rune itself, or the name of the effect. And so in this way, you can see he quickly and easily swaps between these two runes. I can swap between Rune of Protection and Rune of Destruction. And you can see it also activates on enemies simultaneously. Now, sometimes active auras can be a little bit janky, and you might have to like wiggle a character around to get a power to actually work, or an effect to actually land on surrounding tokens. But that's the only issue I've had with active auras so far, and it's relatively minor. It's not great, but it's a minor issue. So with that, I'm going to show you really quick how I set up these auras, because I know some people are kind of confused by the process. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the effects of Rune of Destruction, because it's already set up. In the details, again, in the effect label, I put the name with some description inside of it. Duration, I put end of encounter. The effect is going to be whatever numerical, if it has a numerical effect, you can put whatever numerical effect inside of it. +1 to hit this creature is kind of tricky, because you can't really give it, or you can't really give it -1 to all defenses, because that's not really what it's saying. So I just try to remind my players, you get +1 to hit this creature, right? Instead, what we're going to focus on is back here, auras. Now, if you create a brand new effect, and in fact, let's do that right now. So we're going to create a brand new effect, and you can see it's already affecting him. You can see the icon on his character. And in fact, if we click on his character, we can see in the top right-hand corner up here, we have new effect. And for simplicity, let's call this test. Test effect aura. We're going to submit those changes. Now he has test effect aura. There it is. So we're going to go into this particular effect. We're going to go to duration. And we're going to set the duration to anything we need it to be, right? If you have an aura that lasts until the end of combat or the end of the encounter, then set it to the end of the encounter. If it ends a lot of stuff ends at the end of your next turn, the user's next turn, then set it to that. But for simplicity, let's set it to end of encounter. And like I said, the effect can be anything that it needs to be, but let's say for now it's nothing. It's just, actually, you know what? Let's put something, because I know some people have some confusion with effects as well. Let's say it's system dot, this, by the way, is an excellent module to use. I forgot the name of it off the top of my head. I'll put it in the description of this video, but this particular module makes it very easy to sort of sort through all the different values that can be drilled down into when it comes to a character and NPC tokens. So let's say this aura gives +1 to all defenses, right? So we go to system.defenses. Or it gives +1 to AC, just for simplicity. AC dot value, right? So this is linking directly to the armor class value of this, whatever character token has this specific effect on it. We're going to add 8. This is a super powerful armor class aura. And then we're going to click on the auras tab. And we can see this effect stays where it is. It's already saved. We're going to go to the auras tab. Now we're going to make this effect an aura. We're going to click that. And we can see we have this new drop down that appears called aura targets. And we're going to choose, does this aura affect enemies, allies, or everything? In my case, I want it to affect allies. I don't want to give my enemies armor class. So my allies are going to benefit from this specific aura. And sometimes it does this. I'm not really sure why. I just kind of click back and forth between the two to expand the window. For whatever reason, this window doesn't naturally have an expansion button at the bottom. But that's a quick way to remedy that. The aura radius is going to be 2 squares. So everybody within 2 squares of this token that is granting this aura will gain the benefit of it. I'm not sure if check alignment works in this game. I tested that and creature type, and I wasn't able to get it to work. So I'm going to ignore it for now. Ignore self also seems to have some funky issues. Now, I should note that a lot of these modules aren't built to work with 4th edition, but they just manage to work regardless. So I always ignore self. Check token height, we're not using that right now, but it has some use if you are using variable height systems. Disable while hidden, we're not worried about that. But here's a very important one. Apply active effect icon to affected tokens. What this is going to do is now characters who have this aura are going to show the aura effect icon on their token. And then these are more situational, only apply during the current combatant's turn, and only trigger the aura once per turn. Again, not super useful to us right now, but they have their uses in very specific cases. So we're just going to submit changes. And we can see now that Norbin has this aura on him, but his enemies don't. Right? They clearly don't, because we selected, if we remember correctly, allies as the aura targets, and these are clearly not allies. But what happens if I go over here and start walking towards my allies? Well, look at that. Splug and Rick, who are within 2 squares of Norbin, are now getting the benefits of this aura. And in fact, if I go into Rick's character sheet, I can see his armor class is now 32. It's very high. And I can see he has the test effect aura in his temporary effects. If I have him selected right now, and I can see test effect aura right here. Now I did notice something else, which is that NPCs don't seem to gain defense bonuses from effects. I'm not sure why. I'm assuming it's some kind of issue. They receive other effects just fine, such as attack and damage modifiers, resistances. The only issue I've had is with armor class, or all 4 of the defenses. But regardless, you can see in the effects tab, he does in fact have the test effect aura value on his character. If I keep going forward, now they're getting it. Now everybody is within range of my aura. But maybe Norbin walks away and decides, actually, no one should get this aura. I'm going to stand over here. So immediately, what this allows us to do is instantly keep track of who is affected by a particular aura. And then by using some, a little bit of trickery and a little bit of macro generation, we can create situations where we are swapping between auras, which is great for characters who have that ability, such as rune priests. And like I said, this has just made my life so much easier. My players' lives so much easier. Every time we play, they're like, this is great. I love being able to see all of this stuff at a glance. I love how all of these things are just taking place and I don't have to think about them. And then if they do notice some discrepancy, like, oh, I'm not getting the actual bonus of this effect, or this effect is wrong, it should be X amount, they can speak to me and then I fix it. But I am very vigilant about making sure that all of the effects on their character sheets are accurate, and I check them constantly, right? It's kind of it's a labor of love getting all of these effects to work appropriately, and it does take time, but once it's done, it saves you a lot of time when you're actually in the middle of a game. And so I think that's pretty much the end of this video. There isn't much else for me to say about it. I just wanted to describe how these 3 modules make my life a lot easier and how I utilize them. I do a lot to try and automate as many systems and processes as possible for my players. For example, with these like divergent powers, obviously if Norbin, decides to use his Divine Rune of Thunder on one of these guys, Destruction Rune of Thunder, then he should not only use it, but then also get rid of the other power as well. Well, a very simple way you can do this is to put an item use for the opposite power as a resource consumption. And so now, if you look over here, I'm going to use Divine Rune of Thunder, but it's also going to use protection as well. So you can see after using this power is also gone. Again, it makes his life easier. One less thing for him to track. And in a game like 4th edition where there's a lot of stuff to track, every little bit helps. And your players will be very grateful for it. Let me know what you thought about this video. You know, I could potentially make more. I might go into making sort of like animations, more details on effects and how I utilize them. But like I said, you can feel free to reach out to me. And I think that's basically it for this video. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you all in chat.